So in this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the basic functionality of a workstation, specifically with regards to the different techniques I talk about in the book in Chapter 1. And what I want to do is show you how some of these tools and techniques play out when you're actually recording. So I have a session file with someone I'm working with named Hannah Buckley, and she's recording a 5-song EP with me here as part of her creative project for the Master of Arts in Popular Music and Culture. And we got it in our heads that we wanted to record the guitars, the nylon string guitars, in a kind of old school way, the way I used to record when we just had tape. And so we decided to quadruple the guitar parts, which may seem a little excessive, but it's actually an old tape trick to get the guitar parts to thicken up, but also to create little discrepancies in the performance that draw your ear around the stereo stage. But the trick is you have to get those discrepancies, those little minor differences in performance, to be discrepancies and not errors, so that people are hearing still a single cohesive guitar part. And in order to make that happen with this one track, which was very difficult, we had to do a lot of copying and pasting audio objects. So I talk about how you can cut and paste audio objects and then move them around the workstation. And right now I'm just going to show you how that played out in creating the guitar part for one of Hannah's songs. So here you can see the guitar part for Hannah's songs. You can see there's a lot of edits, a lot of these little squares. Each of these squares is an audio object. I talk about that in the book. So here's one audio object. And then we recorded once and I panned that to the left, and then we recorded that again and I panned that to the right. So these are two different performances of the same part. And then you can see this little butterfly looking thing here. That's a crossfade. And we need those because I took this one little part and then I copied it 3 times in a row. So you get the same chord, the same finger picking pattern played 4 times in a row. And then the next half of this phrase, same thing. One iteration of the chord, repeated or copied and pasted 3 more times, with a crossfade between each cut and paste. Now you can hear maybe you can't, some of you will hear that there's a little fade in between these parts. So that's a very obvious edit. So to sell this edited part, I then had Hannah play 2 more passes, one for the left side, one for the right the way through to smooth out the edits. And you can hear as well that they're not these parts aren't perfectly aligned. So you get the sense of multiple passes on the same guitar part. And though, I've just alerted you to all the different parts that are making up this one guitar part, so you're probably hearing a very composite performance. But the second I fly in the vocals, which I haven't done any editing for, so just so we're clear when we're hearing it, this is straight off the board, that guitar part will immediately reduce to one single guitar part, but it'll sound very thick. And you get all that natural phasing and chorusing. So I'll let you listen to this. So you get a sense of how that guitar part we conceptually turn it into one accompaniment part once we hear the lead vocals in there. On top of it, I'm going to take off the vocals now. I haven't done any editing or anything to it. On top of it all, we have a field recording which Hannah captured on a boat in Georgian Bay. So we'll hear just one long field recording which spans the entirety of the track. You can see it goes right the way through. And Here we can see a little bit of the automation I talk about, here specifically with volume. I really like the field recording, and I like the idea of it starting with, of this track starting with a big wave going by. So I have the first wave going at full scale, or full tilt. And then I introduce a little bit of a 9 dB volume dip while the main guitar part starts. And then by the time the vocals are in, I've come down very far to almost minus 20 dB, and then we'll settle at about minus 15 dB. So I'll let you see this happen and hear it happen in practice. And now the volume's really quiet. All right, and one final thing here I'll show you. We didn't want a bass part. We wanted to create the illusion of a single acoustic guitar accompaniment, but it sounded bass deficient to our ears. Not quite meaty enough. So Hannah's fiance plays synth, and so we brought in a sub-fatty Moog, or Moog, and recorded it direct in. So this is direct in, playing sub parts, and we've rolled off all of the high-end information because we didn't want it to sound distinct, and so any attack sound we had to get rid of. And so all this sub part is doing, I'll turn up the volume really quickly, is it's just playing what the thumb is playing in the finger picking pattern. And we bring it down to a low level, and what it does is it reinforces the sub information of the guitar part, and it's sort of felt but not heard, so it fills out the low end to the point where your ear doesn't miss a bass part, but at the same time it doesn't also note a bass part. So if I turn it up a tiny bit and then take it out, can hear what it's doing. All right, and then one thing about the whole cutting and pasting thing, if we're looking at the vocals here, there's some noise happening beforehand because I haven't gotten rid of anything in the audio. So we had 3 passes, and 3 times there was, we hear that breath coming here, we hear that breath, right? So let's say I want to get rid of those breaths. I can just highlight the part I don't want and delete it.
All the air in.
And in fact, one of the things you do is you get rid of the non-singing parts often. Although normally you're not going to delete the breaths. Singers breathe, and if we want to, I want this to sound intimate and close, so I'm going to have those breaths, because breaths are things that you hear when you're in, close proximity to people, and so it adds to the sense of intimacy. So that's just a basic overview of some of the audio functions that I talk about, and you can see them happening in practice, particularly with the cutting and pasting and the moving things around. And in this track, I color-coded it. So, for instance, we could also fly things around sectionally. So that happens every time there's an orange part. Anyways, and you can see here, for instance, all the browns, the turquoise, the yellows, they sort of get flown around that way. Now, let's say I wanted to add I want to talk briefly about software synthesis, the MIDI stuff I gave you in the book. Let's say I wanted to add, for some reason, some part padding out the guitars really quietly in the background. I can call up this software instrument. I have my keyboard plugged in. And the first part, for instance, is a D going to a G. And we talk about choosing sounds and how you're recording information which triggers a sound as opposed to recording the sounds themselves. So I'm just going to record a brief part, show you how you can edit the part, and then change the sound on it. So hit and record here. Okay, so I can double click this. I threw in mistakes on purpose, so I'd have to edit them. I swear. So when I double click on the MIDI part here, you see these ticks. I talk about this, how the tick gives you the length, and then the color corresponds with velocity. Red is loudest. And then in this group, the green is the quietest. I can move these, of course. So let's say I want that F sharp to happen an octave up. I can just simply move the tick. And if the timing's off a little bit, I can just move it around. And let's say I decide I like it up for the first half and then I want it down for the second half. I can just copy and paste and move it around. So. And then so I made a mistake with this part here.
All the errand doors we take.
And so I would just simply erase it, and I can just click and drag and copy the part. And then let's say that I feel this F sharp is too loud. It does take up a lot of space. I can simply go here, go to the velocity tool, click it, and drag downward to turn the volume down and up to turn the volume up. And then I can, of course, change the sound that these ticks are triggering. We can go to piano, for instance. Let's do a nylon synth piano. That would sound weird. Right, or I can choose strings, pop strings. Finally, the last thing I'll show you with, because it'll allow me to show you quantizing, I may want to throw on a drum part, let's say. So I can go to drum kit. I'm going to choose the Brooklyn drum kit. Same thing. I have my keyboard. That's the part I'm going to try to play. I'll hit record. All right, so I'll double click it. First of all, immediately you can see they're all red, and that's just my recording nerves hitting the keys as hard as I can. But you can also see very early on here, obviously I had no click, so I wasn't sure when the guitar was coming in. So I just guessed. And you can see I'm off a little bit. I can click and drag these, but the guitar comes in slightly after. So then you can move these around and find the right spot. I don't like this, so I can just bring it right back down. So let's say I want to quantize these, which I wouldn't actually want to. I simply click in, select all, and I can choose a value. I can choose half notes, and you can see it just goes to the half note subdivision, quarter note, eighth note. So you can see with the guitars, we push the tempo a tiny bit, so the quantization doesn't actually properly work. But that's how you would do it. And if you didn't like it, you can just undo it and move them around. But I think that is probably as far as we're going to get for a demonstration of the basic things you can do on with a workstation, specifically with how you might use it in a session when you're just sort of recording and demoing out tracks with the MIDI, and then with the audio when you're actually creating tracks.